Hey there, Johnny Peanut Sports. So, a couple little bit of news. Obviously, we already knew Dave Gettleman was going to retire. That's happened. And now there's also a report or something. Everybody's kind of screaming, flipping out a little bit that Joe Judge will be back next year. Listen, I looked this up. There's a few little things here and there about it, but from what I'm seeing, is the Giants ownership and Joe Judge hasn't even met yet, and the ownerships expect Joe Judge to lay out an all new plan for the future, like how he can get this turned around. We haven't even hired a new GM yet. I'm sorry, I just think it's way too early to come on YouTube and start screaming, acting belligerent. If other people want to do it, that's fine. You know, I'm done emotionally with this team. I have been for the last 6-7 weeks. So that's just, if that's what you're looking for, you're not going to get it here. I'm going to sit back and talk rationally about this, and I just feel like 90% of these issues all goes back to number one, John Mara. You know, Dave Gettleman, does he deserve to be fired? Absolutely. But let's just be honest. You know, the guy inherited a mess. He came into a team that probably had the worst cap situation in the NFL. The locker room had collapsed. That's not a defense. That's just to say, listen, the guy came into the worst situation in the NFL in years, maybe decades. And he made some bad signings right off the bat, but let's be honest, like Nate Soldier, some of them signings he made, bringing over Kevin Zeitler, they weren't the best deals. They didn't quite work out, but they were kind of deals that you had to be made. His biggest mistake was drafting Saquon Barkley too. I'm sorry. From what I read and everything, that was a forced John Mara pick because he wanted to stick with Eli Manning. And John Mara came out at the end of the last year, 2020 season, and was all apologetic and saying like, oh, he learned his lesson from 2018, all this. If John Mara had nothing to do with that pick, why is he the first one apologizing for it and talking about learning from it? Seriously, Saquon Barkley was a John Mara's pick. I don't give a shit what anybody says. That's what I believe. And overall, though, you know, listen, Gettleman has made a bunch of decent picks, decent players. The problem is he's had misses in two important parts, right? The offensive line and edge. And I feel like, listen, he's drafted plenty of depth, plenty of good players. He just hasn't drafted any of them high-end, top-of-the-league superstar players. And I think that's where the problem really came along. Obviously, he had injuries this year. It's not an excuse, but it's a reality. And I really did think there was enough talent in this team. If the offense could get it turned around and the scheme could start working, to where you could get 8, 9, even 10 wins. Obviously, it all fell apart. You know, it's just that kind of year. And it's the kind of years we've been having in the last decade. I don't know what it is. The worst luck. It's just unbelievable. Shit show after shit show. So Dave Gettleman's gone. You know, he deserves to be gone. I'm not going to sit here and, kick him on his way out, be on him too hard. I know a lot of Giants fans wanted him straight up fired. I don't think that's the right thing to do. He's an older guy. Let him go out and retire. He was a big part of Super Bowls that we won here. I get you're sour, bitter on what the team has been the last, 4 or 5 years, but it's the right thing to do is just to let him retire. I even saw some people that were insulted that he had his family and friends and was taking pictures down there. I mean, come on, guys. Let's keep this football stuff. Let's not get personal here. But yeah, Joe Judge. Listen, I'm not going to jump the gun. If Joe Judge is fired as a fan, I'll celebrate it. Do I know whether it's the right move or not? I don't. Because I feel like the biggest failure of this coaching staff so far was Jason Garrett being brought in. And again, it goes back to ownership. I'm telling you right now, I know Jason Garrett was forced on Joe Judge. Joe Judge goes to John Mara at the end of last season. And John Mara pushes him to keep him, one more year. Continuity. And this was an argument we had since about week 3 last year. A bunch of us was out on Garrett. I mean, to me, it was just an obvious thing. The offensive system sucked. It's about 30 years too late. And I told myself I'd be patient, give it one more year. And it looked okay the first, 3-4 weeks of this year. But ultimately, by the Cowboys game, it had reverted into right back to where it was. And, the biggest injuries. Shane Lemieux and Nick Gates both go out for the year, and now it's just killer. From that point, you can't run the ball, and this scheme is entirely built on running the ball. So there's number one, the reason why this team has went down the shitter this year. The offensive system. Number two, listen, people don't want to hear it, but injuries. We've had as many injuries as, I think we've had the most injuries in the NFL this season by a decent little number. Hey, listen, you can point to teams like the Titans and say, hey, they're in the playoff. They've had a bunch of injuries this year, but they were a Super Bowl caliber team. Let's not get it twisted. We even saw Baltimore, which was a Super Bowl caliber team. They had injuries. They're not in the playoffs. They won 8 games. And I can point to a few games in the season where the defense started off horrible, where we could have 8 wins easy with this team. And that's with how horrific our offense was. So, nobody wants to hear injuries as an excuse, but it's a major factor in why we only have 4 wins this year. And people now are harping on the Jason Garrett firing. I obviously should have been fired, after the 2020 season, but I thought it was the best move for this team. Let Freddie Kitchens come in. Maybe he can at least, draw up some plays over 2-3 weeks and get a different offense where you can at least get a read on some of these players that you got to make decisions on. And the biggest blow of all, maybe, was Daniel Jones having his neck injury. And, I don't want to harp on him too much. I mean, this guy might never play again. So we don't even get a decision on that. It's just one of them years. And I know if Joe Judge comes back, people are going to blow their top. But here's the thing. I keep hearing from fans, you want the best possible candidate for head coach and GM. I'm sorry to tell you, that's not going to happen. Even if we clean house completely, that's not going to happen. And you can look this up. After Pat Shermer was fired in 2018, Bill Belichick knew that he was going to have 2-3 coordinators that was moving on other teams. He sat down and had a meeting with all his coordinators and warned them about the New York Giants head coaching vacancy. So this is not something new. This is, and it's a small club, GMs and head coaches, all these guys that work with somebody, all the way down the line over the years. There's only 30 teams. There's only, so many high-end college teams out there. It's a small club. They all talk. They all got the dirt on each other behind the scenes. And I'm telling you, since the McAdoo, Pat Shermer bungling, you're just not going to get the best candidates out there. Do I know if Joe Judge is the guy or not? I don't. His first year, I felt good about him. This year has been a disaster because of all the things I talked about. But once again, on top of this already being a place with red flags, now you're firing another coach 2 years, and half the reasons has nothing to do with the coach. I know people want to sit here and talk about press conferences. I'm sorry, I don't watch the press conferences. I don't give a shit what the coach says. In a season like this, the coach ain't even talking to you anyways. In the press conference, they're talking to the owner. They're making comments for the players in the locker room. So, I just don't care about the press conference stuff. I don't care about lying. Honestly, I don't want my coaches and GMs to tell the truth in press conferences. It does nobody anything good. And it doesn't, listen, and when you're pissed off, it doesn't matter what Joe Judge says. When he's asked a question, if he gives a real answer, a real legit answer, fans are just going to say their excuses. So it's lose-lose. So what's the sense? I mean, if you're just going there just to scream and vent, whatever, cool. But to use some of these press conference stuff against them, to me, I'm sorry. You can get upset at this. I just think it's silly. Now, it was a little alarming, the one comment where he went on 11 minutes or whatever. It's kind of like, shut up, stop talking. I get that. And that was probably the only press conference I really saw from Joe Judge this year, because it was just the media's just harping on it. And by the way, the media is always going to go the negative route. The media is always going to go the fire route. So, listen, the thing with me is okay, Joe, you fired Joe Judge. Then what? Who you hiring? Because this is what I hear. The GM's going to come in here and hire the coach. That's not how the New York Giants do it. The New York Giants have never let their GM pick the head coach. The owners have always picked the head coach, and that isn't going to change here. That's why I said, again, it goes back to owners. So I'm sorry to say, we are stuck in this situation. There's no getting out of it. You bring in, plus the team's already set. 95% of this team is coming back. You can only move off a couple of players. There's only so much cap. The same team's coming back. Why bring in a new head coach now? And then a year from now, the whole team, if the team falls apart next year with a new head coach, then it's all starting to get tore down again. At that point, you're going to want a different coach for the tear down and the rebuild. So I just feel like if you're gonna go, you want to win next year route, right? And you feel like, hey, we got some good draft, we got some good stock in the draft. We got quite a few picks. And people are saying we got no money. I think you can free up 30 million. You can sign a high-end offensive, guard or tackle and grab a couple of linemen in the draft. And you can say, hey, maybe them linemen need a year to grow and turn into like a real high caliber player. And maybe you say, it's going to be another year after next before the offensive line is set. But I'm telling you, I've seen it so many times where, look at the Browns a couple years ago. They went from dead last, worst offensive line to the second, third best offensive line in the NFL. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. Them things are rare. But I'm just saying as the NFL, they do happen. I do think there's a good bit of talent on this team. And I do think, I don't want it stripped down completely bare and started over like we did in 2019. I want to give this one more year. You got one more year. If you're bringing Daniel Jones back, you got one more year to have him prove it. You got one more year with all the talent, all the big contracts. And listen, all these players can come off the books 2 years from now. So if you can't win next season, it's done. Joe Judge is done. Daniel Jones is done. Saquon Barkley's done. James Bradbury, bing, bing, bing. Go down the line. Kenny Golladay, you can get off that contract. Adoree Jackson, get off that. These are all 3-year deals. You can get out of all these deals. 2 years from now, if you don't win next season, you can strip it down to the bare bone minimum and you can completely rebuild the right way. I'd rather do that with Joe Judge, so when it's stripped down, you can bring in a different head coach where that head coach is there for the new haul. And you've at least gave your head coach 3 years. I'm telling you, around the NFL, we are considered a toxic organization. And firing Joe Judge, I just don't think it's going to fix it. And I'm a guy who wants Joe Judge fired. And I'm on here, I'm kind of talking myself into it. And the last thing John Mara wants to do is rebuild. He's already taken enough heat. The Giants tear down this team as much as they can this year, and they only win 4 or 5 games next year. People are done. They're going to quit being a fan of the team. You're in New York. You got no choice but to win. Look how people are acting over possibly bringing back a coach for a 3rd season. I mean, for most franchises, that's a bare minimum. You should give your coaches at least 3 years. I'm sorry, in 2 seasons, you have no idea who a first-time head coach is in 3 years. If you went by a 2-year standard for first-time head coaches, nobody would be. They'd all be out of the league. Bill Belichick would not be where he is. So I really do think we need patience for 1 more year. We need to replay this thing 1 more time. And if you're just foaming at the mouth and you just want them gone for the sake of being gone, okay, who you getting? Who you bringing in? Who's going to give you the absolute 100% chance of, or 90% chance of playoffs next year? What coach is doing that? The Caldwell guy? I just think 1 more year. That's what's going through my head. If Joe Judge comes back next year and he don't choose the right offensive coordinator and the right offensive scheme, yeah, it could blow up. But what's the fucking difference, to be honest with you? This team has been trashed not last 9-10 years. 9 out of 10 years, this team has been horrid. What's 1 more year? And then we can do a rebuild the right way if it don't work out. That's my thoughts on the situation. Again, I don't think it's 100% that Joe Judge is coming back or fired at this point. I think a lot will be said after they have this meeting. Again, a lot will be said when a new GM is hired. I think if they fall in love with a GM and the GM says, no, I want Joe Judge gone, I'll bring in a list of new head coaches for you guys to interview. I think that's a possibility. So don't go crazy. Joe Judge is coming back. I just don't think it's factual at all yet, as of yet. So anyway, that's it for me. I'm kind of just riff-raffing, and I kind of just want to talk about what could happen, what couldn't happen, and I think I kind of talked myself in. I think I keep talking to myself into one more year and just play this back and try with a new system that's going to work. And I just think there's enough talent with this draft and a few couple signings. I think you can win next year. I really do. If you're an Eagles fan, or you're sunken to the point of just bleh on everything, you're probably laughing at me, or you're just gonna dislike and clock out. But that's my opinion. I don't know. It's just how I feel. I can't help it. But anyways, like, subscribe, and peace.